I'm thinking a lot about censorship. That's definitely on my mind because it seems to be ramping up a bit. Actually, well, it is. There's no actually about it. There's no casual reaction to this. Censorship is becoming more and more evident. So I think about that because, and it's all part of a piece. And now we get to what I'm primarily thinking about today and what I'm going to talk about. It's just control. I'm preoccupied all the time with the extent to which I can feel the cold hand of control being slipped up us all, like into a glove puppet, so that they can work us from the inside, and it troubles me. And this week I've been thinking, I've been talking about it elsewhere, but I'm thinking a lot about Domesday, not D-O-O-M's Day, but D-O-M-E is Day, which is to say the Domesday Book that William the Conqueror commissioned about 20 years after he invaded England. The context for it is that trouble was brewing, and he was, confronting another expensive war, and so he commissioned his scribes to go out and find exactly what England was worth, so that he could tax it to pay for the defence of his realm. And I'm aware. I mean, Domesday Book is one of those. I certainly heard about it at school. It was in there with whatever the other, I don't know, the basics that we got handed. I don't know, the First World War and the Russian Revolution. Somewhere along the line, Domesday Book was just in there with the bricks. So I've always known about it, and I remember it is always talked about in a kind of triumphal sense that, that this was, and it is, that it was something amazing. And and it was something else that England or Britain should be proud of, because Domesday Book was the first attempt of its kind. It was the first survey on such a scale. No other king of Europe had such a reference work to go through to find out how many pigs are there on that guy's farm. You could look it up. Nobody had a cheap. So you're always kind of sold it as, it's another good one, Magna Carta 1215, that showed them all, and Domesday Book, that showed those Europeans how to organise a kingdom. But more recently, with a jaundiced eye and a jaundiced liver probably, I've started to look at it in a different way. And hiding in plain sight, I don't know why I didn't think about it in this way earlier, but it's just another example of centralised control via the collection of data. If you haven't noticed that up to this point, you're probably watching the wrong podcast, because I do harp on about this at some length. It's all about control, and it's all about data. That brilliant line about if you're not paying for it, you're the product. What they're getting from us all the time is data. And they've now, artificial intelligence and the rest is now being fed with so much of our private personal data that they know us better than we know ourselves. And that kind of granular level of understanding of what you buy, when you buy it, what you do with it, where you go, who you talk to, what films you watch, where you go on holiday, all of that's being collated, and that's power. And it's the foundation of wealth for those that have taken the trouble to gather that data. And then you think about back 1,000 years ago, William was doing it, and he wasn't even the first. He found a very efficient format, and he did something that to some extent was unprecedented. But kings have always, as far as I'm concerned, kings and queens have always had that attitude that anointed by God, as they tell themselves that they are. Everything's theirs anyway. King of England, England's mine. King of Scots, Scotland's mine. And there's people living on it, which is unfortunate, but I'll just have to put up with that. But I'll help myself to everything that they're sitting on, whether they want me to or not, and I'll call it tax. That's the mindset. So I mean, it didn't start with William the Conqueror. He was just better at it. He was always known as William the Bastard because his mum wasn't married to his dad, so he was illegitimate. So he was William the Bastard, but he was known. He was greedy and he was cruel as well. He was a very efficient king and a very effective warrior, but he was he was trouble as far as it concerned anybody who ended up in a straight fight with him. Interestingly, at his funeral, when it came time for his funeral, he was so big, he had one of those kind of Henry VIII style coffins. I think Henry VIII was practically buried in a piano crate or something, but William the Conqueror was a big man and he was in a big box, and a grave had been prepared for him in the crypt, and it didn't fit. It was just a little bit tight, and they had to kind of jump on it, kick it to get it in the hole, and it burst, and William inside it burst, and the church was filled with the most appalling stench. Apparently, had to get the potpourri out, get the windows open. So just I don't know why I thought of that there, but there you go. There's an aside. But the point of Domesday, he didn't call it Domesday. He called it, his scribes called it a descriptio, a survey of all England. But the people, once they realised what it was, called it Doomsday, the day of doom, because it reminded them of the book of judgment that's referred to in the book of Revelations. St. John, the Revelation according to St. John, has a book of judgment in it when the big man will come back to judge us all and see who's been good and who's been bad, who's been naughty or nice. Because just like there'd be no dodging that, when Jesus is going through the book of judgment, there'll be no dodging it. Well, Domesday Book was the same. If they came for you to collect taxes from you, there was no possibility of saying, I've only got 2 cows and my plough's broken, because the survey already knew that you had 50 cows and pigs. So it was irrefutable. And it was so effective that the people said, well, just as we can't dodge the book of judgment, we can't dodge this either. So they called it the Domesday Book. So that's how effective it was as a survey of everything. It only took 100 days to get the first draft organised. Everything south of the River Tees down. By August 1086, but just the following year, he was able to read it, and it was everything. Every farm was counted. Everyone who worked on the farm was counted. Everyone who lived there. Every field was assessed. Every cow and pig and sheep was counted. Every grain of wheat was counted. It's data. It's data collection. And as I say, he figured it was his anyway. If he needed it, he was going to come and get it, regardless of who was owning it. And it all reeks of that notion of you own nothing and you'll be happy. It reeks of that idea. Even 1,000 years ago, the likes of William was thinking, they can have nothing and put a smile on their miserable faces while they're at it, because I'm the king and therefore everything here is really mine. And that's what's on my mind. I just think about the fact that the powerful are always the same. 1,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, or right now, they're always the same. It's a narrow group that are convinced they're divinely anointed. Even the atheists among them, they think that they are born entitled to everything, and they just need us out the way till they can help themselves to all the good stuff. They think all of this is theirs from sea to shining sea. Just be aware. And it manifests itself in the collection of data. So just as William's guys came out and collected as much data as they could for Domesday Book, another Domesday Book has already been assembled about us, and it will be every bit as unavoidable, and its consequences will be every bit as permanent. Mark my words.